format, they can policies. Some common policies include requiring multi-factor authentication for sign-ins that are flagged as risky or unusual, responding to accounts that show characteristics of having been compromised, requiring that a sign-in be conducted from a managed device in order to succeed, requiring the use of approved client applications, and blocking access entirely if warranted. When configuring conditional access, the conditions being evaluated are referred to as signals. Some common signals include the user who's logging in or groups they're a member of, IP location information, which, if desired, can be used to block or allow the IP ranges for entire countries or regions, characteristics of the device that the user is logging in with, the application that the user wishes to use, real-time calculated risk detection, where Azure AD can identify risky sign-in behavior and then require users to change their password or do multi-factor authentication, or can just block access altogether, and Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, which enables user activity to be monitored and controlled in real time. Once a signal has been detected, you can configure your policy to take one or more actions. Some common ones are block access, which is the most restrictive decision, or grant access, which is the least restrictive decision, but you can still require additional constraints, like requiring multi-factor authentication, requiring the device to be marked as compliant, requiring that the device be a hybrid Azure joined device, which means that it's joined to your on-prem AD and also registered with Azure AD, requiring that the client app has been approved in advance, or requiring enforcement of an Intune app protection policy, which governs what an app is allowed to do with corporate data. Azure AD Entitlement Management lets you automate access requests, resource assignments, and reviews and expirations of resource allocations. Entitlement access packages contain groups of resources and associated permissions, allowing them to be managed in bundles. The resources can be teams and groups, applications, or SharePoint Online sites. The access packages can be admin assigned, or you can permit self-service access requests. And this functionality requires that you have a premium P2 license. Now I'm going to show you a quick demo of this. Time to take a look at the process of creating an access package. This is going to be done in Azure Active Directory, so I'm going to start by going to the Azure AD Admin Center. And from here, I'll go to Azure Active Directory, to Identity Governance, and here I'm going to take a look at access packages and say that I want to make a new access package. So in this case, I want to do something simple. I just want to allow people to access a particular team and a related SharePoint site. So if I look in Teams right now, so you have a team here called Continuous Improvement Team, and I just want to allow people to request access to it if they want it. So I'm going to call this Continuous Improvement. So I'll give it a name and a description. I'm going to save it in the general catalog. Catalogs are sort of security containers if you have multiple groups of admins that want to create different sets of access packages. But in this case, I'm just going to put it in the general catalog. And I'm going to say now that this package is going to give access to the Continuous Improvement Team. Here it is. So I'll select that. And also the Continuous Improvement Team SharePoint site right here. So just those two things, that's what we're requesting access to. And specifically, what I want them to request access to is to be a member of the Continuous Improvement Team and a member of the Continuous Improvement Team SharePoint site. Next, we want to say who can request access and what the requests are going to look like. So in this case, I want users in my directory, and I'm just going to say everyone. So everyone can request access. It does require approval, and they have to justify their reason for wanting the access. I'm going to say there's just one stage of approval, and their manager is the default approver. But I will add fallback. I'll say that that demo admin is a backup approver, and I want to enable new requests and then go to requester information. And at this point, I'm going to just add a couple of questions that I want to ask people when they're making the request. So first, I'm just going to say, allow them to give a short text answer to why they want access to these resources. And then specifically, I ask them what continuous improvement methodology they're using. And I'm going to say they can choose from Kaizen and Six Sigma. Okay, and this access package currently is going to be set to expire in 1 year, 365 days. You can see we could set it to other things, but I'm just going to say this access, once granted, will last for 365 days, and the user can also request a specific timeline if they need something different. We will not require access reviews, nor will I apply any rules, so I don't need any custom extensions or anything like that. We could see add flows to run if, when a request is created or something, but in this case, I'm just going to say, we'll go ahead and say, go ahead and create this. Okay, and there it is. My access package has been successfully created. Now, at this point, what this means is that when a user wants to request access to those particular resources, they want to use this access package, they can go to the My Access portal link. So let's demonstrate that now. Okay, so I'm signed into Office as a different user, as a user named Alan. And if we look right now, you can see that Alan is not a member of that team. He's not a member of the continuous improvement team. So what Alan can do is he can go to myaccess.microsoft.com, and it brings him to things he can request access to. And here are our access packages. So he can say, okay, I want to request access to continuous improvement. And here are my questions. He has to say, why do you want access to these resources? And he has to give a reason. And here's the multiple choice. He can request for a specific period, but we're going to leave it with the default. And he can now submit his access request. Okay, his request has been submitted now. And so now I'm signed in as a different user. I'm signed in as Alan's boss, Nestor. And Nestor has now received an email that says approve or deny request. So he can now click approve or deny request, which takes him to myaccess.microsoft.com. Here's Alan's request, which he can see the details of course. He can go and see the things that Alan filled in. And having reviewed it, he can now approve and say, looks good. Welcome to the team. So now switching back to Alan's profile, when he goes and looks at his request history, you can see that here's the request that he put in and the date that it was requested. And you can go see that, in fact, his boss approved it, which means that now he can go back to Teams here. We'll go ahead and refresh. And you can see that now, sure enough, he is now a member of the continuous improvement team. Microsoft analyzes trillions of signals per day to identify new and existing threats that can compromise users' identities and other sensitive data. This ongoing analysis has been used to develop identity protection, which allows organizations to accomplish 3 key tasks: automate detection and remediation of identity-based risks, investigate risks using the portal, and export risk detection data to your security information and event management system. New sign-in risk factors are identified all the time, but some common ones include sign-ins that originate from anonymous IP addresses, impossible travel sign-ins, like when a user signs in from New York at 9 p.m. and then the same user signs in from Stockholm at 9:07 p.m., indicating that the identity has probably been compromised, sign-in from malware-associated IP addresses, sign-ins using credentials that have been observed in data from known security breaches, and password spray attacks, which are a type of brute force attack where a compromised list of usernames is combined with common passwords in an effort to mitigate the type of lockouts that occur when an attempt is made at brute forcing the password for a single account. Identity protection is configured via the Azure AD admin portal by selecting Identity Protection from the Security Getting Started blade in the Protect section of the portal. As with many of the other features we've discussed here, this will only be available if you have a premium P2 subscription. The user risk policy is one of the components of identity protection. This can be assigned to individual users or all users. The risk level that triggers policy is a likelihood that the account is compromised, with likelihood being defined by a number of factors that may change over time. When the policy is triggered, you can choose to block access, or enable access but require the user to change their password. Another policy that's available with identity protection is sign-in risk. This can also be assigned to individual users or all of them, and the risk level that triggers the policy is a likelihood that the sign-in is coming from someone other than the user, once again based on a set of conditions that may evolve over time. Here too, you can decide to block access, or enable access with a password change requirement. Members of the Global Administrator and Security Administrator roles have full administrative access to identity protection. Security operators can perform typical help desk operations such as dismissing user risk events and confirming safe sign-ins, and security readers can view identity protection reports, such as the risky sign-ins report that you see at the bottom of the slide. When an identity protection policy is triggered, the user will receive a message like the one you see here. Depending on the configuration and the severity of the event, the user may need to call the help desk to have their sign-in unblocked. As previously discussed, conditional access allows you to control the conditions under which a user can successfully sign in. Implementing a conditional access policy requires that you have an Azure AD Premium P1 license. You begin by navigating to the Azure AD Admin Center, selecting the security blade, and selecting Conditional Access. You then create a new policy, assign users and groups to the policy, assign conditions, for example, sign-in risk, and then specify what you want the policy to do when triggered: block access, or grant access with additional requirements. Now, to illustrate, I'm going to do a demo of this process. Now we're going to take a look at creating a conditional access policy in Azure Active Directory. This is going to be done in Azure AD, so from the Admin Center, I'm going to go to the Active Directory Admin Center and sign in. Go to Azure AD and go to the Security Blade, and from here I'm going to select Conditional Access and create a new conditional access policy. Now, in this case, I'm going to do something pretty simple. I'm just going to say that for certain apps, if the sign-in is risky, I want to require multi-factor authentication. So I'm just going to give it a descriptive name here. Okay. And I want to apply this to everybody. Notice, by the way, that it's saying don't lock yourself out. This policy will affect all users. So in other words, make sure that you don't accidentally do something that prevents you from signing in. This is going to include me. I could, of course, say everybody except for, somebody, but in this case, I'm actually just going to say everybody. And now I want to apply this to specific cloud apps. In this case, I want to apply it to the Office 365 app itself, and also to the Power BI service. Just those two. And next, I'll pick the conditions that I want to trigger the policy on. And in this case, you can see I have, if it's a particular platform, a particular location. In this case, what I want is if the sign-in risk is high or medium. Now, risk is, of course, something that's kind of dynamically determined. And the folks at Microsoft are always kind of evolving the algorithm that's used to determine this. But in this case, I'm just saying whatever the current definition of high or medium is, that's what we're going to trigger on. And then here's what I want to happen as the result of this policy being triggered. So if a risky sign-in is detected, I want to grant access, but I want to require multi-factor authentication. So in other words, in the event that this condition occurs, we are not going to block access. We want to grant access, but we want to require multi-factor authentication. And I'm going to, as a best practice, I'm going to leave this in report-only mode for now. In other words, this is just let the policy be enforced, and I can go and check and verify that it's being enforced, but it's not actually causing the MFA yet. It's just, I'm just going to see that the policy is being applied the way I expect it to be. So currently it's report only. And once the policy has been in place and it's doing what I want it to do, then I can switch it over and say, okay, start enforcing it. Once your conditional access policies have been created, you can manage them via the conditional access dashboard and monitor them via sign-in logs. When you want to allow users from an organization outside of your own to access resources or perform operations inside of your Microsoft 365 tenancy, you can create B2B accounts for them. B2B accounts are a special type of guest user account that allow users from partner orgs to access Microsoft 365 resources. With B2B accounts, the account information is stored in a separate tenancy and represented in your tenancy as a guest user. Configuring B2B accounts establishes a trust relationship with the external Azure AD tenant, enabling the external system to authenticate the account. And now I'm going to demonstrate how to set up a B2B account. Now we're going to take a look at creating a B2B account in Azure Active Directory. Although this is done through Azure AD, I can start from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and go to the guest users page and say I want to add a guest user. At this point, as you can see, it switches me into the Azure AD Admin Center. And I'm going to say I want to invite a user. So I'm going to invite a new guest user. And in this case, I'm going to invite a user named Adele. Note that this is a separate tenant from the one that I'm creating this in. So this is someone from a different Microsoft tenant. And now I'm going to invite her. Invitation has been issued. So now I'll switch over to Adele's account and we'll take a look at the invitation that she's received. So here you can see I'm signed in as Adele in this other tenant. And if I go take a look at her inbox, sure enough, there's an invitation here from MOD administrator, and it gives a little warning saying, this is, make sure you trust this domain, make sure you trust this person. I'm just going to accept the invitation. And it asks her to, say it's okay for the trust relationship to be set up, because this, in fact, does require some sharing of information between Adele's tenant and the Contoso tenant, and specifically, name, email address, photo. So she's going to accept. And here we are. Now, right now, she doesn't have any access to actual resources in my organization. So I'm going to switch back over to the Contoso tenant now that her guest user has been added, and give her a little bit of access and see the effect. So back here now in the Contoso admin portal, sure enough, here's Adele's user. And although she shows as having her email address in the guest tenant, she does actually have a proper address here in the Contoso tenant. And that means that now if I have a team here that I want to add her to, I can say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and add her as a member. As you can see, she does show up as a guest in my directory. I can go ahead and add her. She's now a guest member of the team. And that means I can switch back over to Adele's account again. And here in Adele's inbox, you can see that she's gotten a message that she's joined that she's been added to the team. And if she goes to Teams, so we'll go to Teams as Adele here. Currently, see, she's just looking at the teams in her current tenancy, but she can switch, see, to her Contoso guest user. Sure enough, there's the Joint Task Force team, and she can participate in it as a guest.